our now. And that ball is expanding. It is encompassing more and more knowledge, more and more time, more and more space. And we don't have to go outside ourselves anymore for anything. The future is not really out there. The future now is, I think it's more like a layer of an onion around us, but it's in the ball. And it's a potential level of our present moment reality. So that if you raise your frequency, you would rise into that next layer, and you would have that future or potential vision right now. You could have it as soon as you raise your frequency. It doesn't have to be some long linear process. So cause and effect, it's not exactly the same as we've always believed it to be anymore.
That's really interesting. And would you say also that the information age that you mentioned in this passage is also an effect of that in this sense, because we have more information at our disposal now, as it were, than ever before, probably in history?
Yes.
We're building, if you will, the library of Alexandria, on the web. More and more stuff is being poured into this web, and even old books and scriptures are being scanned and etc. And it's also an overload of information that can take place there as well, obviously. And how would you say then that intuition plays into this in terms of the transition from the old age, if you will, from information over to a new age of intuition, where we simply tap in maybe to the knowledge instead of sitting there and physically reading it, for instance?
Yeah. Well, before I answer that, I'd like to back up one step, which is that, we're coming out of the industrial age, and I think there's a whole process we need to understand, that the industrial age was very mechanical and slow, and it was about the physical world, right? It was about the body, about having and doing and making. That kept accelerating through that process until we created machines that were computers that could handle a lot of information and do a lot of things. And that created a sort of quantum leap into the information age, where we went from body to mind. So we evolved out of a kind of a dense level into a less dense level. And then that accelerated very fast, especially as the internet came along. And it's going like faster and faster and faster as everything just keeps, spiraling. And it's getting us to a point now where, to answer your question, the linear mind, as we have been used to using it in a cause and effect way, where you go from point A to point B, we cannot process this amount of information in the same way with that particular habit of of thinking. We can't do it. So the only way to sort of understand things is to let go of that willful processing and relax and open up, where everything exists in us all at once. It's a field of knowledge. And that in each moment, anything we need to know will come out of that field into our mind, and we'll know it. And then it'll go back into the field, like on the shelf. The knowledge is on the shelf. When you want it, you take it down and use it, and then you put it back. But you don't try to know everything all at once in a conscious, linear way anymore.
Right.
And so this is the intuition age, where you allow and you have direct knowing, and it's all tied to the present moment.
Would you say that can we take the example of, this has been brought up I've heard it many times before, but the idea of the 100th monkey and all this too, that it seems also that if information, so to speak, is fed into the collective mind, or even the unconscious mind in that sense, then it's going to be easier for the rest of those who take part in that collective mind to tap into it and to know something. Meaning that a few hundred or even a few thousand people on Earth might study something, and then afterwards it becomes easier and easier for more and more people to grasp those concepts quicker. Would you say that that's true?
Absolutely true, because I think that, especially given that the frequency is increasing on the planet, that our sensitivity is increasing, which I find means that our ability to work with telepathy is really increasing. And that means, that the 100th monkey thing is absolutely natural. Why wouldn't you just suddenly, if you're very porous and open and telepathic, be able to get ideas from anywhere, everywhere, any time period, any dimension? But the magnet for what needs to be known is what's useful, what's needed. See, in the moment, the body is still very important. We have to ground the things that are necessary for creation. And so in each moment there's one thing, there's one need, there's one urge. And that's the call of consciousness, whatever is really needed is what comes. And you can relax, because you don't have to know everything. You already do.
We have to remember, the things
that we
already
have to allow the recall, or invoke the knowledge and that you need, but sort of relax and say, hey, it's already in me, in my present moment, and whatever I need is going to be given, because that's the rules of in the intuition age. It's not linear. It's all in the moment with you.
How would you say that things or concepts like truth handles in a situation like this? If we have, for instance, X amount of people on one side of the camp who believes one thing to be believes one other thing to be true. Do you think that there's also splitting up taking place at the same time, that where we kind of go our own paths, our own way of what we consider to be the truth? Or is there a consensus out there, so to speak, that everyone is working towards? What's your take on that?
Well, again, with higher frequency energy and consciousness, you start to experience this unified field. And the unified field allows everything to exist. So it's not just that there are, oppositional points. There are thousands of points of view,
yeah, exactly,
that are all coexisting. And you start to understand that you need the other person because they're an aspect of you that you didn't have time to create in yourself. That, oh, they've got another piece of the puzzle. So let's listen. Maybe there's something really valuable here. And let's throw this into the mix. And so it's conflict and opposition and good and bad and evil and all that stuff is coming up now as part of that stress reaction to the higher energy. Because when we go into survival, we try to be right about our old beliefs, and then we have to fight off anything that conflicts with that or doesn't agree with that.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing in politics now. And oh my God, it's just awful in our country here. It's awful,
Same thing here.
And, yeah, but that's just the first stage. And I think that there will be wise, enlightened people who see the bigger picture, who understand paradox and the both-and view instead of the either-or view, who will call for people to rise above their small positions and come and look at the bigger picture. That's what's going to have to happen until people can start to see that, oh, everybody's got an interesting point of view, and each piece can be useful for various things.
Do you think that other structures in society will have to, or rather, how do you think that they will relate to these phenomena if they become more and more prominent? If we, for example, look at it from the point of view of politics and things like that, government structures of organizations and things that manage things in society, do you think that they will have to eventually reform themselves as well to be able to keep up with this, or what do you think will happen there?
I think we're already seeing what's happening is that there's going to be a dissolution or destruction or melting of old systems that are based on the old paradigms of linear thought and separation, which causes people to go into fear, which causes people to want to have control, which causes there to be a superstructure, like the banks or whatever, that try to control everybody. Because it's becoming more of a collective. And I think there will be a new form of politics that comes up out of the truth of what that collective, co-creative, cooperative whole is all about. This is not the time yet, but it will be coming, I'm sure. Because the old systems, based on old ways of thinking, they're too low frequency. Literally, they can't function anymore. And the people who are moving on in frequency are, in the U.S., it's progressives, we call it, the people who are looking beyond and trying to go beyond the bipartisan views to see something that's more holistic and, keep in tune with the vibrations.
Yes.
But I do think that, corporate practices and the patriarchy and all kinds of things where control has been the key element will fail. They're just going to fail.
Do you think that they will fight harder, so to speak, as they begin to notice that they are going, as they slowly lose their power, their grip as well?
That's part of the transformation process. As the subconscious stuff comes up, and for corporations, it's that they're going to, like the insurance companies here, we're going to lose our control of such a high profit, we might have to do something to actually help the people and not ourselves. And so as that comes up, they're going, no way, we are not losing our money. So they're going to backtrack and clamp down and go back into the subconscious methods that used to work for them and try with a lot of willpower to force that to work. And part of the will, will is the mind. And it has to do with cleverness and linear thought. So they're going to use all those old clever methods to try to make things work again. And when that, eventually they won't work. I mean, they may work a little bit for a little while, but then they're going to exhaust themselves and something else will take over.
Do you think that we can see examples of this if we look at things that are happening on the web now in terms of more and more open source material, for instance, and things of that nature, that it's a small indication of potentially what is to come? Do you think that's the case?
I do, yes. And I think things like Facebook and, all these communities of people who are, it has its problems, certainly. But
sure.
I think it's amazing how easy it is to know people in a certain way, and actually even to start to develop some intimacy through some of these sort of superficial things that you would never think you could connect with people that way. So this is part of the understanding of each other as souls, as part of a collective. It's extremely intimate.
Penny, do you think that technology is our aid in this scenario as well? I'm thinking, for instance, of things like if we indeed could develop free energy devices, or if we could learn to teleport instead of sitting 12, 16 hours on a plane, or if we talk about communication, again, the next level of that, or do you think a more organic technology will eventually come down the road? What do you think about that?
That's really a great question. I have very mixed feelings about it. I think that technology is an outgrowth of the consciousness that's running around on the planet at any given time, and that it will advance, and there will be some amazing things, especially medically, that are working with vibration to cure illness, things that we couldn't touch. There will be solutions for energy sources that will come almost overnight. That I think that things will come out of the other dimensions, really, and maybe through group mind. I've even seen groups of children working together to invent things. That's been a common vision I've had for a long time. So I think that the technology will parallel the consciousness, which is great, but it's right now serving as another distraction from the energy, and with especially cell phones and texting and the addiction. I heard a story the other day that people are taking their smartphones to bed with them. You know? They're like texting in the middle of meals.
Sure. Yeah.
And you know, it's like, goodness gracious, what is the addiction all about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, sometimes I think that addiction, for instance, that fascination may be because some process of consciousness is actually trying to develop itself within these people that they didn't know how to develop through meditation, for instance. So they're doing it through the the technology in some way.
Well, that's a very interesting point, because you mentioned things like telepathy before, and I'm seeing that these technologies are, well, the reflection of that need, if you know what I mean.